back in the day, there were probably 10 to 12 to 15 hijackings a day of tractor trailers of high value loads. And, the Mafia, back in those days, the Mafia controlled everything. Nothing moved in New York City without one of the five families controlling it.
Welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr. I'm a former criminal profiler coordinator with the Philadelphia FBI, and I was responsible for profiling dozens of serial crimes over my career and capturing the Friday night bank robber after 30 years on the run. And with me, as always, is Jim Fitzgerald.
Hey, James R. Fitzgerald here, Fitz for short. I'm a former Ben Salem police detective sergeant at suburban Philly. Joined the FBI in 1987, went to New York City for 7 years, transferred to Quantico as a supervisory special agent and a criminal profiler, later a forensic linguist, helped catch the Unabomber, DC Sniper, and a few other cases over the years.
Welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. Our guest today is retired FBI agent Joseph Pistone. Joe is well known for his groundbreaking undercover work in organized crime and the author of two books, The Way of the Wise Guy and Donnie Brasco, My Undercover Life in the Mafia, which was made into a feature film starring Johnny Depp and Al Pacino. Joe, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for joining us.
Well,
Hi, Joe.
Thank you for having me. Getting into the Mafia was like, whoa, nobody's done this before. So we just kept extending it.
Let's talk about that a minute. How did that come about? How did that idea come up where they said, you know what, Joe, we want you to penetrate the Bonanno crime family? How did that even come about? And how did you build your backstory?
Well, I had a when I say old timer, he was supervised by the name of Guy Barato, who's the head of the supervising the truck squad, a New Yorker, had done undercover work. There were, back in the day, there were probably 10 to 12 to 15 hijackings a day of tractor trailers of high value loads. And, the Mafia, back in those days, the Mafia controlled everything. Nothing moved in New York City without one of the five families controlling it. So the idea was to attempt to infiltrate the fences that were fencing this stuff, the commodities. So we had locations, bars, and restaurants that we knew that they hung out in, and the idea was basically to hit the street and go to these places and get my face seen. And it had to be a 7-day-a-week job because, you can't work 5 days a week. And, this guy's never around on weekends, if you do get lucky enough to infiltrate. So, and we didn't do anything back then with a contact. I went and I had my birth certificate, and social security card, in Donnie Brasco. And I just went and took the driver's test, get my New York license in Donnie Brasco. I went and opened a bank account, and that's a story. I go to this bank to just get a checking account, and they said, where have you banked before? Well, I hadn't banked anywhere under Donnie Brasco before, and I said I don't have any other banking references, and they said, well, we need to have other banking references. And I said, well, I don't have one. And they said, well, we can't open it up. So I said, well, let me talk to the manager. So the manager comes over and, what's the problem? So I said, I'm trying to open up a checking account. And the young lady here says, I can't because I can't provide prior banking information. And they said, well, that's our rule. And I said, let me tell you something. I said, I just got out of jail.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you're going to hold that against me? I did my time. I served my time. I'm trying to go straight. And now you want to deny me, a checking account? I said, I got money here to open it. And I guess the guy figures, well, we don't want any trouble here with, I don't know if it was the bank's rule or who, but I got a checking account that way.
That's amazing.
And I went and rented my own apartment. We didn't do anything with contacts, none at all. I went rented an apartment. I was on 92nd and 3rd at Rupert Towers. Went out and bought a car. Cash for the car. So that's how I started, and I moved into the apartment, moved out of my residence, moved into the apartment, and just started hitting these different locations. But again, and this was a cold entry. We didn't have any informant introduce me to anybody. It was just get seen, hopefully get in conversation with people, and see if you can make any progress. I did this for maybe 5-6 months, and the only conversation was, what I was going to eat, and my bottle of Heineken. That was my conversation with anybody in any of the joints, because you don't walk into a joint where the gangsters hang out and say, hey, I'm Donnie Brasco, and I was a jewel thief, and you have to have a profession, because why does any criminal element, any criminal organization need you if you don't have a profession?
And a money-making profession. That's
exactly right. And you don't want one of violence, because you're not allowed to get involved in violence. And plus the fact, if it is one of violence, you can't go in and say you're a leg breaker or you're a stick-up man or whatever, because if you're lucky enough to infiltrate, that's what they're going to use you for. So it was a jewel thief. And that's another thing, too. Whatever you say your profession is, you better know it. So I went to school, learned about diamonds, precious gems, learned all about being a jewel thief, and went for there. And like I say, after about 5, maybe 6 months, I was lucky enough to get in a conversation with a bartender in this place I always hung out in, and we became friendly. And he introduced me to a Colombo's, and I hung out with the Colombos for a few months, and this was a very active crew. In fact, they were hijackers. So I bypassed the fences and went right to the wise guys. So
that's Joe. Establishing, first of all, a fence, for some of our audience who may not know, is kind of a middleman, usually a guy, and he will take stolen material from whoever the thieves are. It's not always the thieves. Rarely are the ones selling what they steal. They turn it over to a fence. It could be auto parts, could be stereo equipment. Of course, it could be drugs, and so you were getting in with those guys to establish your credibility. Were you buying stuff from these fences, or were you selling stuff to them that, of course, you got from the bureau as contraband, but you could come in and sell it to them?
Once I infiltrated, I was selling. I would get diamonds, I would get watches, I would get other jewelry from the bureau, and hey, I just you didn't have to say I got it in a heist, because once it became established that I was a jewel thief, where else would I get it? When you sell it at swag prices, so they know that you're a jewel thief. So yeah, basically. Now I did buy some stuff, like you buy stuff, and for the reason I think I can get rid of this uptown, downtown, or wherever. But mostly you sold it. Yeah.
So while you're getting involved, what's your real first contact with anybody that's a made member of one of the crime families? What's your real first contact?
Well, the first contact was in this one bar that I used to hang out in, and actually was 4 or 5 blocks from my apartment. And the contact was with, and that's another thing too. You have to know your target group. You got to know who you're going against. You have to know everything about them. You should know if they have any rules, regulations. And the mafia does. The mafia has some rules that'll get you killed, and they got other rules that will just not show you any respect. And some of the rules of the mafia that'll get you killed is if they think you're an informant, they think you're a snitch, stealing money from the family, that'll get you killed. Disrespecting somebody above you. In other words, if you get into an argument with a made guy is somebody that's been officially inducted into a particular mafia family. If you get into an argument with him, you can't insult him in front of other people during that argument. If you do, and you're not a made guy, if you do insult him, he has the right to to do with you what he wants. And another rule that definitely get you killed is you can't lay your hands on a made guy. You get in an argument with a made guy and you're not a made guy, and you physically handle him, you're going to get killed. And you might even get killed if you're a made guy. It depends on who you're messing with. And another rule is you don't fool around with a wise guy, made guys, wife, daughter, or girlfriend. That'll get you killed. So before you go undercover, you should study your target group. And that's another thing most undercovers don't do. They don't study their target group. They don't know all the ins and outs of the organization. But you should, because if you know them, it'll help you infiltrate, and more importantly, it'll keep you alive while you're in there. Well, in this one place I was hanging out in, it actually was a Lucchese, and I used to stop in there a lot because it was, like I say, 4 or 5 blocks from my house, and it was a place we knew that Lucchese guys hung out in, and they used to come in there. I don't remember, Wednesday or Thursday, and have dinner with their girlfriends. After a couple and I would always sit at the bar. After a couple times, I note I come in there one night, and one guy is missing, but the girl that was with him was there, and during the course of the evening, she gets up and goes to the ladies' room, and she comes back and she stops and she says hello to me. And, not want to disrespect anybody, I say hello. Well, when she goes back to the table, I motion to the bartender to come over. Now, I never talked to this guy except ordering my food. And I said to him, and I don't call him by his name. I know his name, but I was never introduced to him. So I don't call him by his name. I said, I want to go on record. And that's a mob term. I want to go on record. I did not ask that young lady to stop and have any conversation with me. He just nods his head. And well, this happens like 3 or 4 more times. And every time I say that to him. And then after about the 4th time, he says, hey, look, he said, if you want to talk to her, you can talk to her. Her boyfriend went bye-bye. Okay. As I told Ray, he didn't go to Disneyland.
No. That means something else in mob world.
Yeah. So now the guy, what does the guy know? He knows, hey, this guy's a street guy. He knows enough not to get into conversation. He knows enough to tell me that he wants to go on record. So then he finally starts talking to me. And then the next time I come in, he introduces himself. He says, "Hey," he says, "I'm Charlie." And I said, "I'm Donnie." That's all I tell him, I'm Donnie. Because, these guys, they don't introduce themselves like normal people. They don't use their last names. They use their first name or they use their nickname. So that's another thing that he knows. He's, hey, this guy, the guy's the street guy. He knows what the hell's going on. And then another time, he says, "You like to gamble?" I say, "Yeah." He says, "Well, when I close up, I'm going to an after-hours joint. You want to go?" So I said, "Yes." So that started the ball rolling. He doesn't introduce me to anybody, but I'm with him, so nobody questions me. But he never introduces me to anybody. But I know there's guys from all the families. It was an after-hours joint that was run by the 5 families, and each family had a representative there. And then I guess at the end of the night they divvied up the take amongst themselves, amongst the families anyway. So after a couple of weeks, we're not discussing anything, nothing illegal, nothing. But I bring in a packet of diamonds, I give it to him, and I say, "Charlie, I need X amount of money for this envelope." He takes the envelope, puts it in his pocket. A couple of weeks goes by. He said, I come in one night. He says, "Hey, Donnie, somebody left this envelope for you." I take the envelope, put it in my sport coat, and that's it. Now we go to the card game, and now he's introducing me as Don the jeweler. I never told him I was a jewel thief, but I give him a packet of diamonds and the prices, and like I went to Tiffany's and bought them. So now guys are talking to me, and one of the first guys was a guy from the Colombos, guy by the name of Jilly, and he had a club out in Brooklyn. And when I say a club, a social club, it was actually a store where he sold his swag. All the swag closed. And he invited me out, so I went out and hung out with them for a couple months, and was gathering all kind of intelligence information on. And he's introducing me to guys in the Colombo family. So that's how it started. The first family was actually the Colombos. Yeah.
Joe, this would be a good place, real quick, for our audience again, who maybe aren't mobsters or maybe don't know all that much. New York, for 100 years now, maybe longer, has been divided up and controlled by 5 families: Gambino, Lucchese, Genovese, Bonanno, and Colombo. They have different turfs, right? They have
Correct.
Different entrepreneurial aspects in which they're involved: hijacking, drugs, prostitution, gambling, right? And they pretty much follow the rules most of the time, and there is not too many internecine wars between them. Is that how you would explain it?
Yeah, that's a perfect way to explain it. And they are divided up into sections that they can conduct illegal business. And one family can't go into another family's territory to conduct illegal business without the permission of the family that runs that territory or owns that territory. But yeah, and it's the way it was across the country. In most of the other cities, like Chicago had one family, Detroit one family, Kansas City, Florida, Philadelphia, and you can't go in, even to another state without that family's permission to conduct an illegal activity. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the way they operate, and they still operate that way today. From what I know is the territories, but New York is the hub. Buffalo. They even, the Bonannos even have a family up in Canada. Part of their family up in Montreal. So they were strong back in the day. There wasn't anything that moved in the country that they didn't get a piece of. Nothing. Today, I would say since probably the 90s, the late 90s, they're just another organized crime group involved in everything they were involved in, but they don't control the country like they once did. They don't control the unions like they did. They don't control politicians like they did, law enforcement like they used to. They're just another organized crime family.
Well, Joe, I know other groups have come in and done that, and we can save that for some other podcast. But the Italian Mafia had that control for maybe 100 years? Other groups now have kind of taken over in some ways.
And these other groups are more dangerous than the American Mafia. One thing about I found out is they kill, but they kill their own.
Yeah.
The American Mafia is not out killing citizens.
Right. Right, it's true.
They're killing somebody. If it's a mob hit, that individual was involved with them. He was either a member or an individual that was doing illegal activities with them and tried to screw them in some way. That's the only saving grace about the American Mafia, is that they're not out looking to kill citizens like these other groups. Not that they're out looking to kill citizens, but if they're looking, to whack somebody and that person's in a restaurant, they'll go in and take out anybody they can just to get to that one person. With the American Mafia, that wasn't their style.
And they wouldn't mess with law enforcement either. There was kind of a code. We wouldn't shoot and kill them. They don't shoot and kill us. Maybe back in the Capone days, and those guys in the Chicago things.
When I say modern times, correct. Yeah.
When did you realize that you were in? I know Charlie introduced you to some people, but when did you realize? And I know there's some things that came out, but when did you really realize, hey, this is really happening?
Well, after I got into a physical confrontation with the two guys in the Colombo family, and I knew I had to get out of there because it was actually a physical confrontation. But at the card game, I met a guy by the name of Tony Mira, who was a Bonanno guy, and this guy was the meanest guy this guy was stone cold killer and just mean. So I started hanging out with him, and he started introducing me to the Bonannos, and then I knew that man, this is the real McCoy, And then he went. He had just gone out of the can, was out of the can for maybe 6-8 months, and then he went back, and I started hanging out with Lefty Ruggiero, who was a Bonanno guy, and then then I started meeting captains and other individuals that had some position in the family. And Ruggiero, our boss at the time, was a guy by the name of Mike Sabella. And the way it works is if before you become a made guy, you're an associate. But in order to become a made guy, you got to be white, male, and Italian. It's not an equal opportunity organization, and they're not woke. If you're not white, male, and Italian, you're not getting in.
Full Italian, right? Full Italian.
Yeah, into a mafia family. And what happens is, if you are, and they think you're a good earner, then the guy that you're with, like Ruggiero, was a made guy. He went to his captain, who was Mike Sabello, and said, "Hey, I'm claiming Donnie. Now I'm with the Bonannos," and that's when that's when whoa, this stuff is real now. And what that means is you can't do business with any other family without the permission of the Bonannos. Yeah. So.
Well, let me ask you this. During your time working undercover in the Bonanno family, was there ever a time that you thought you were going to die?
Well, yeah, the more so with the, well, yeah, but with the Colombos, when I had the beef with those two guys, we were locked in a room, and it's a long story, but it comes over me not telling them that they couldn't do two robberies, so they were kind of ticked. So we go into they call for a sit down, and we go into the back room, and they lock the door, and they put a gun on the table, and tell me if if Frankie and Patsy were the two guys, if you don't convince us that you're such a good thief that Jilly says you are, the only way you're going out of here rolled up in that rug. And that confrontation took about probably 4.5, 5 hours before they closed it down. Jilly, closed it down.
Were these two made guys? Were they both made guys?
One guy was a made guy. One guy was, and one guy wasn't. But now, I'm in a jam here because I can't make nice with these guys because, and again, when you're in this type of situation, you got to maintain your respect and your credibility. So if I make nice, I lose both. And if you lose your respect on the street, you're dead. And in this situation, the only thing they understand is a confrontation. It's not a verbal. It's a physical confrontation. So I sucker punched the guy that wasn't a made guy. I hit him. We get into a fight, and the other guys, the made guys hitting me, but I can't do anything to him because he's a made guy. But I lay it pretty good on the other guy, and then they break it up. But then I knew, look, I can't come back here anymore, and I explained it to Jilly, and he understands, and that's when I start hanging out downtown with Tony Beer and the Bonannos.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And the stories that there's a lot that goes on, and as I mentioned the other day, another first that we had was I was able to marry up two Mafia families. A Mafia family, the Bonannos, with the Balistraries in Milwaukee, was able to form a marriage to do business together. And I was able to form a marriage between the Bonannos and Santo Trafficante, the boss of Florida, to do illegal business together. I mean, it's like, who does that? I mean, and if you know anything about the Mafia, you don't get to sit down with a boss unless you're on the in. And I'm sitting down with two bosses with Sonny. By that time, my captain was Sonny Black Napolitano out in Brooklyn because they had killed Carmine Galenti, who was the boss. So they reshifted the crews around, and Lefty and I get put under Sonny Black out in Brooklyn.
Joe, was that the famous hit in Little Italy in the restaurant when they took Galante out? Was that him?
Yeah. I was at Joe and Mary's restaurant. Yeah.
Front page of New York Post.
It was actually in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, and then those two cases. I mean, like I say, this case was instrumental in the whole taking down of the mob. I mean, Rudy Giuliani was the AUSA. I mean, was the USA. He didn't. I think John Martin, started out as the USA, and then he became a federal judge. That Rudy came in, and he was the United States attorney. That really turned up the screws to the mob. But this was the catalyst. Every Mafia case after that had information from our case, in their indictments, in their affidavits. we identified the Sicilians in the Bonanno family. The pizza connection case, biggest at that time, the biggest drug case going. We identified those individuals. I knew Sal Catalano, who was the boss of the Sicilians. I had met him on the street with Sonny and Lefty. I mean, just the individuals that I met that were, ranking members of the other mob families was unreal, and that was a big coup. Was a lot of intelligence, being able to identify made guys, positions. I testified in the commission case, laid it out. I testified. Well, I was in 17 different trials. We put the Milwaukee family away. I mean, the Bureau did a hell of a job on that case. As you guys know, I mean, you guys you were in New York, and it really was the catalyst for bringing down the mob.
Joe, in 1989, I got put on a special assignment looking for the murder of the DEA agent, Everett Hatcher. Yeah, and it was by a Jerry Chili wannabe named Gus Faraci. And I believe I was hearing through the grapevine, our folks were talking to you to get his background on Chili, his daughter Babe Chili, whose husband was taken out. He went bye-bye, as you say. John Petroselli wound up being killed over that. And then, of course, their own people killed Gus eventually in November later that year.
Chili's, that they were Chili was his father was a capo in the Bonannos, and him and Lefty's son hung out together. And in fact, both of them got whacked. They tried to screw. I don't know if it was Hispanics, but they were doing a drug deal with some non-Italians, and they found out that they were getting screwed, and they whacked Joey, and they whacked Lefty's son. Faraci. He was hooked up with the Bonannos. Junior Chili was a capo.
And apparently in prison, Faraci helped defend Jerry Chili in a cell fight. So it's just the opposite. You can't lay hands on a made guy. Here, Faraci defended Chili and beat up the other guy, and Chili sort of adopted him, much like Lefty kind of did you for different reasons. And that's when they got brought. But of course, all the heat came down once he killed the DEA agent, and all the rules changed after that.
Yeah, everything changed. And I remember. I guess I don't think they knew he was a DEA agent. I think I don't know, what spooked him or what.
They were sure he was an undercover agent from somewhere.
Yeah,
but they didn't know DEA.
Yeah. And it
I'm sure that hit home to you, Joe, when you heard that story.
Yeah.
Right? But for the grace of God.
Yeah, the Italian mob, back in that day, they would do business with blacks, but they wouldn't. They didn't trust them. They wouldn't become. You know what I mean? I mean, I can remember there were a couple guys from Harlem that were running numbers for the Bonannos. And they would come down to the club, to settle up and everything. And they wouldn't even let them in the club. And I don't care what kind of weather it was, rain, snow, sleet. They wouldn't let them in the club. So I don't, and Faraci was a drug user too. So that might have had a lot to do with it too. He might have been high. And got spooked. I don't know, but that was a sad.
Quite the manhunt.
Yeah, that was.
I remember it. I remember it. Joe, in all the time you were undercover, with the crime families and the mafia. Was there anything that ever surprised you about the people you were working with while you were undercover?
Yeah, there were several things, and that's what a lot you don't see. Well, some of it surprised me, some of it didn't. Like I said, I grew up in a neighborhood, so as a kid growing up in the neighborhood, you can go into the social clubs because they knew who you were and everything, and you knew these guys were, you knew they weren't legit, they weren't straight, and but what surprised me was how nonchalant it was about killing anybody. I mean, a guy got a contract, to kill his best friend, and he does it. I mean, somebody that he may have grown up with. The guy gets a contract to kill his cousin, a relative. That kind of surprised me because unless you're really into it, it's a mob hit. Well, I don't, you're reading the paper. Well, I don't know that that's his cousin, or
right.
Excuse me, I don't know that they grew up together. They've been friends since they've been 5 years old. I mean, Tony Mira, who they killed over me, his nephew was one of the shooters.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, his own nephew was one of the shooters. So,
yeah, there's nothing sacred.
Yeah,
nothing sacred.
And two, what you don't realize again is, and I'm talking about the guys that I hung out with, the Italians, and even though they're stone cold killers, the Italian culture, they're still close to family, I mean, guys, I met guys' wives, I met their girlfriends, I met their kids, and I'm thinking to myself, man, this guy's a stone ass killer. I know he killed 17, 18 people, but around his kid, he's like, he'd do anything for his kid, and you don't look at him in that light, or when you're at the house, just sitting down, relaxing, with the family and everything. You're thinking, man, this guy's normal right now, But then again, he has no problem going out that night and whacking his best friend. And then where are we going to go eat tonight?
Blood is not thicker than water, apparently, in the mob.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Well, let me ask you this, Joe. You eventually you get outed, right? The bureau pulls you out, and I don't know if you want. What's that?
Before I got made,
right? And just before you got made, right?
I was due to get made, and they would have let me go through with it because
why not?
Well, because there was a shooting war going on. The side I was with killed three capos that weren't aligned with them, and I was given a contract to kill one guy. So that's the bureau. That's why they shut it down. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when you come out, a lot of the guys that you were with that didn't know what you were doing, a lot of those guys got whacked.
Yeah. They whacked Sonny Black. They whacked Jilly. They whacked Tony Mira. Lefty's on his way to get whacked. The bureau picked it up on a wire, and the surveillance team snatched him off the street, saved him from getting whacked.
Did that bother you? Did you feel bad about those guys getting killed because of you?
No.
Well, it wasn't because of Joe.
No, I know that. I know the
circumstances.
Yeah,
right.
No, and I think there's a lot of reasons why I think that I was able to maintain that 6 years is because my whole thing was look, I'm not a social worker. You know, my job is to gather evidence and put you in jail if I can. Did I want to see anybody get killed? No. Did I make you become a gangster? No. You were a gangster before I got there. You were a gangster during the 6 years. And you're going to be a gangster when you go to jail and you get out of jail. You know, those guys, that's the life, you know. So did I want to see anybody get killed? No.
Of course not. Of course.
Did I lose sleep over it? No. Because they're out looking to kill me. You know, they had a $500,000 contract on me. Do you think they would have, you know, lost sleep over killing me?
You think that's still active, Joe?
Well, it never was rescinded, but I don't think anybody's out every day looking for me, you know.
Well, it looks like you're still in disguise, though, with the sunglasses and all, you know?
Well, you know, I don't know who you put this out to. You know, I might have my neighbors, you know. I mean,
yeah, I hear you.
Where I live, nobody, you know.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows my backstory.
Joe, I think they're probably more mad now at Sammy the Bull than you.
Yeah,
so if he's going to make it, I think you will too. You've been very generous with your time. I want to run some things by you at the end. You and I have one little thing in common besides, of course, our FBI background. Is I worked the Unabomb case. They made a mini series about that. It was very popular with my character as the protagonist. But your movie, you're a movie played by, Johnny Depp portrayed you, Al Pacino. Let me upfront questions. Some other podcast would happen with me, but tell me one thing the movie really got right and tell me one thing they really got wrong.
Well, they got wrong was I never slapped my wife. I mean, that's a big thing with me.
Sure.
And that wasn't in the original script, you know. That was put in without my knowledge. I didn't cut that guy's leg off with a hacksaw. You know, you're talking about things that were, you know, Hollywood. They cut that guy up with a chainsaw because he was so big, but it wasn't me. We never went to see a psychiatrist during the times. I never had $300,000 in my attic. That was Hollywood.
Yeah.
They got the relationship pretty good. They kept the storyline pretty good. And you know, being involved in a movie, you know that once they sign your name, you know, they don't want to see you anymore. I was kind of lucky that I signed with Barry Levinson, who's a great director. I signed with him and his company, and he kept the script pretty much to the truth, you know. And the things that I didn't like, they said, hey, you know, our job is to put asses in the seats. You know, we're not making a documentary. But it was
same
pretty
thing.
accurate, actually. Yeah.
What about that AUSA in the airport?
Yeah.
Did you really knock him out there?
Yeah.
Tell us about that. Tell the audience about that.
Well,
I think it's unbelievable.
I was with Sonny Black, and we were down in Florida, and we're walking through the airport, and this attorney I knew is coming the opposite way. We're walking, and he's calling Joe, and I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. So the closer he gets, I just clock him, and he goes down. And I said, "Come on, Sonny, let's get out of here." And he says, "Donnie, what'd you hit him for?" I said, "Sonny, didn't you see he was looking at my prick? What do I know? I don't know him." No.
You can't teach someone that is ingrained. That is growing up in the streets.
Yeah,
quick
exactly.
thinking, on your feet. Excellent move.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an excellent move. So
was there actually a lion? Was there a real lion?
Yeah, we had a lion. We actually did have a lion.
Okay.
Did you really?
See, you know, we weren't feeding them in the car like that scene, but we did have a lion. And what happened was somebody gave him a cub. They gave Lefty a cub, and we were keeping it in the social club in the Motion Lounge. But what they forgot was a cub becomes a lion. So Sonny Black's cousin had a warehouse, and so we put it in the warehouse, and then finally they had to get rid of it. Yeah, but yeah,
bye.
We had a lion.
So tell us what it's like, or what Johnny Depp. I'm sure our audience wants to know, what's Johnny Depp like, and what's your relationship? And do you still talk to him today? How about Al Pacino?
Yeah, well, both are great guys. Of course, I'm closer to Johnny because I spend a lot of time with Johnny. Before the movie, I spent every day shooting the movie with Johnny. After the movie was over, I spent a lot of time with him. I used to go out to California and spend time with him at his house. He did another movie, and I worked on that movie with him. And I'm still good friends with him, his sister. He's a good kid. When I say kid, he's not a kid anymore, but he's a good guy. He was always family orientated. I'd never seen him step out of line with anybody. Treats everybody on the set with respect. I know a few months after not a few months, probably a little more than a year after the movie, after we finished shooting the movie. But I was always in touch with him. And like I say, he calls one day. My wife had been diagnosed with cancer, and he calls one day, and he called me Pistola. That's what he called me. And he says, I'm mad at you. I said, why are you mad at me? He says, you don't tell me that Maggie has cancer. I said, well, Johnny, he said, anything you need or she needs, you call me. And I don't care what it is. You call me and I'll get it. You need an airplane to go somewhere for treatment, you got it. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is,
Yeah, it's a good guy.
And every time he would come to New York, he'd call and say, get your family and come over to such and such a hotel for dinner, Then he'd say, bring your grandkids. My grandkids were young. In fact, my one granddaughter was in a movie, actually. He said, and bring your grandkids, and come over and hang out, and we'll have dinner. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is. And like I say, I'm still in contact with him. As a couple months ago, I'm in an airport and I get a phone call, and Pistola, yeah, he said, I'm in Paris, and guess who I'm with? I said, I don't know who you're with. He said, it's some insane guy's birthday, and we're in Paris celebrating his birthday. Here, talk to him. And it was Al Pacino. We're in Paris celebrate. I mean, they're both great guys. Pacino, too. Yeah. Pacino is a great guy to, on set. I just love the guy. I can't say enough about him, be honest with you. Yeah.
Well, if anyone hasn't watched the movie Donnie Brasco, check it out. I watched it last night, second time in about 10 or 20 years. And, of course, the few books that Joe mentioned in the beginning of the podcast. So
it's funny.
Three books.
Well, I got several books, but they're the three you want to get. And I did a book with Joe Bonanno.
Oh, yeah, I read that.
Called The Good Guys, and it's truth and fiction. And for the audience, Joe Bonanno is the son of Bill Bonanno is the son of Joe Bonanno, the boss of the Bonanno family. And Bill was a made guy, but he was a very intelligent guy. He was a college graduate, did time in a can. went straight. And it turns out that he had the same agent that I did, book agent, Mickey Freiberg and Carmen Levia, who both passed, God's rest their souls. And they come up with an idea of doing a book together, and we did, and we got along pretty good. He was, like I say, he was a smart guy, college graduate, very well read, very well spoken, and it's called The Good Guys. It's a novel, but there's a lot of truth in it as far as.
Right. Haven't read that one yet, Joe. I'll have to pick that one up.
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon, I guess.
Yeah. Let me ask you one last question here, Joe, before we kind of wrap here. Did the Bureau take care of you when? And I know the Bureau's good. Jim and I, all three of us, were all part of the same organization. But when everything came down, and there's that $500,000 contract on you, I mean, I know what they should have done, and so does Jim. But I'd like to hear from you. Yeah, and I'm sure our audience does too. What'd they do for you?
I look. If you ask me, I have to say yes. I mean, I had good people behind me. I don't know if you guys know Jules Monavolante.
Yeah, yes. Sure do.
Yeah, well, Jules was at headquarters at the time, and he was in New York. He was a super in New York. And he was running the case out of headquarters. So he looked out after me. The only negative I could say is I had an SAC that not in New York, where my wife was and family actually were living, who gave me a hard time. And the Bureau couldn't do anything about it. I mean, you guys know you can't beat an SAC.
Special agent in charge, the big boss of every division. Yes.
Yeah, at the time I'm just a GS 1311, and no matter what you do, they're not going to go against an SAC.
Right.
And but other than that, I pretty much they did, but that stuck in my craw a little bit. That I just said, well, transfer me out of here. I mean, and the whole thing was, you're on my books, but you're not doing me any good.
Yeah, in other words, you're bleeding his budget, and he don't like that.
Exactly. And I said, well, transfer me out of here, or have the Bureau pick, because at that time I'm flying all over the country with trials and everything. And he tried to get me fired a couple times.
Jesus.
Because I wasn't bringing any stats to him. It didn't make any difference. I was bringing him to the Bureau, and I don't want to.
Yeah, I know. I hear you.
Dirty laundry.
We all know guys like that.
We all. I mean, hey, listen, we've all ran into guys like that, Joe.
Yeah. But what I would say is that, what a lot of people don't know, I resigned over that, and I had like 17 years in. But I said, look, if this is the way it's going to be, I'm quitting, and I did. And then I was out. It was out for like 3 years, maybe. I think it was probably 3 years. But I was still teaching. I was still doing the undercover schools and doing organized crime lectures at Quantico. But then he left. He went to became the number two. The number two guy in another agency. When they move a guy to straighten another agency out. And when he left, I will say they did call me and say, you want to come back? But I said, well, yeah, and they said, well, all right, do the application. I did it. And they said the only thing is you got to go through all of training school. You got to go through 22 weeks of training, new ages training.
And how old would you have been at this point? How old?
I think I was 50, maybe 49 or 50. You know?
Jeez.
And my one question was, well, what's my salary going to be? And they said, whatever you left, 1311. I said, you're going to pay me that? This, you know, and back then that was a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
They said, yeah, you're going to sit in class, you know, and listen. And they said, yeah. So I said, well, I mean, you know, you guys know they don't take retreads. You know, it's tough to come back. They just don't do it. And if they do take you back, once you qualify on the range, then, you know, as a retread, then they'll send you, you know, wherever they're going to send you. They said, no, you got to do the whole 22 weeks. I said, all right. So I did, you know. And what's funny was I got assigned to WFO, and Bear Bryant was the SAC, a good guy. And
yeah, I know.
But I was Washington field office here in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, but I was
Bear Bryant was not the coach of Alabama. That just was his name. But I mean, he was a good guy.
Yeah, terrific guy. And I was assigned to Quantico, though. I was. Yeah, and that's the difference. I was on Bears. What was that? TSA or whatever, you know, whatever the hell it was. But I was
staffing level, TSL.
I was an instructor at Quantico, and I was in the safeguard program at Quantico. But I was on, you know, Bear was paying my, you know, I mean, it's a difference between individuals, you know. But
well, there's a takeaway in that, Joe.
I'm sorry.
You know, there's a takeaway in that. There's a positive out of that. When you graduated from the academy, you never had to pack your bags and move anywhere. You were already home.
I was already there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I lived at the academy for like, you know, for like 6 months until I had a house built, you know. But here's the thing. I'm out of the academy 1 week, and guess where I'm on an airplane to? Hawaii.
New York.
No,
Hawaii.
Yeah. I had to go there and do you know, Fitz, a safeguard assessment.
Oh, yeah.
On the undercovers. So it's not a bad deal, right? 1 week out of the academy, and they're sending me to Hawaii, you know.
That's not bad at all. That's not bad at all.
No. But, you know, everything worked out fine. So.
Well, I got to say, Joe, this has been amazing.
Well,
it's flat out amazing. And you're amazing. Thank you.
Appreciate you having me on, guys. I really do.
Thanks for everything you've done for the Bureau, for law enforcement. And I know it continues to this day, directly, indirectly. But we're all learning from individuals like you, and certainly newer agents and law enforcement folks are too. So again, thanks for all you've done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Take care, guys.
All right, you too.
That was great, Ray. And I know he was great at your university last week, Wilmington University, and he was great with us tonight. So check out his movies, his books, and you guys will be know even more about Donnie Brasco, a.k.a. Joe Pistone, or is it the other way around? On that note, everyone, subscribe to Code Red Podcast and follow us on all Code Red Podcast social media platforms. We'll see you next week with another special guest. And here's a clue. He's a former rock and roller and a forensic linguist. But I'm going to leave it at that. So stay safe and be aware of your surroundings. And if anyone says they want to take you bye-bye, you may want to think twice.
If anybody calls for you, that's another thing, when they call for you. And we never got Joe to explain that, but if they call for you, it's not good. So if someone calls for you, unless it's your mother and father, it's probably still not good when they call for you, especially if you're young. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Bye-bye, Ray.
Take care, all.